Chapter 22 A Goodbye and an Introduction. Aspects of Multidimensional Personality as Viewed Through My Own Experience. In the historical time of Christ, I was a man called Millennius in Rome. In that life, my main occupation was that of a merchant, but I was a highly curious gentleman, and my travels gave me access to many different groups of people. Physically, I was round and stout, not at all patrician in my bearing, and given to untidiness in my dress. We had a type of snuff, made from a certain kind of straw. I used it constantly, often spilling some upon my robe. My house was in the busiest northwestern part of the city, just beyond what you would call the heart of town. Among my wares, I sold bells for donkeys. This may not sound like a very grand product, and yet families on the farms outside of Rome found these highly useful. Each had a special sound, and a family could tell by the sound of the bell their own donkey from innumerable similar ones. Donkeys were also used in many businesses within Rome itself as carriers of burden, particularly in the lower occupations. The number of bells, their particular pitch, even the colors, all had meaning. In the tumult of the city, the particular bells could be recognized, therefore, by the poor and by the slaves who waited to buy products, often wilted foods from the laden carts. The bells were only a small portion of my business, which dealt largely with cloths and dyes, but they fascinated me. Because of my interest in them, I did far more traveling about the countryside and the region than any prudent man should. The bells became my hobby. My curiosity drove me to journey in search of different kinds of bells, and led me into contact with many people I would not otherwise have encountered. While I was not literate, I was shrewd and lively of mind. Special bells, I discovered, were used by various sects of Jews, both within Rome and without. While I was a Roman and a citizen, my citizenship meant little except for providing me with minimal safety as I went about my daily way, and in my business I encountered as many Jews as Romans. I was not too far above them socially. The Romans had no clear idea of the number of Jews in Rome at that time. They went by guesswork. The bells on donkeys belonging to the Zealots had upon them the symbol of an eye. They came secretly into town, hiding as much from other Jews as from Romans. They were good bargainers, and often did me out of more than I deserved to lose. I learned about the Lord of Righteousness from a cousin of his named Sharaba, who was, as clearly as I could figure out at the time, a quote-unquote sacred assassin. He was drunk the night I spoke to him in a stinking stall outside of Jerusalem. It was he who told me about the symbol of the eye. He also told me that the man Christ was kidnapped by the Essenes. I did not believe him. Nor at the time he told me did I know who Christ was. At the time that Christ lived, his experience was known to very few, comparatively speaking. To put it bluntly, I knew that someone had the ball, but I was not certain of the person. In dream states, the situation finally became known to me and to many others. The Christians, generally speaking, did not want Roman converts. I was later one of these, and because of my nationality was never trusted. My part in that drama was simply to acquaint myself with its physical foundation, to be a participant, however small, in that era. Much later, in year terms, I would end up as a minor pope in the 3rd century, meeting again some of those I had known, and, if you will forgive a humorous note, once more familiar with the sound of bells. It is not my purpose to go into my past existences in any great detail, but to use them to make certain points. First of all, I have been many times both man and woman, and I have immersed myself in various occupations, but always with the idea of learning so that I could teach. I had a firm background in physical existence, therefore, as a prerequisite for my present quote-unquote work. I did not play the part of any towering personality of historical note, but became experienced in the homey and intimate details of daily life, the normal struggle for achievement, the need for love. I learned the unutterable yearning of father for son, son for father, husband for wife, wife for husband, and fell headlong into the intimate webs of human relationships. Before your idea of history, I was a Lumanian, and was later born in Atlantis. Using your historical reference, I returned at the time of the cavemen, operating as a speaker. Now, I have always been a speaker, regardless of my physical occupation. I have been a spice merchant in Denmark, where I knew Rupert and Joseph. In several lives I was black, once in what is now called Ethiopia and once in Turkey. My lives as monks followed my experience as a pope, and in one of these I was a victim of the Spanish Inquisition. My experience in female lives varied from that of a plain Dutch spinster to a courtesan at the time of the biblical David, to several existences as a humble mother with children. Now, when I began contacting Rupert and Joseph, I hid from them the fact of my numerous lives. Rupert, in particular, did not accept reincarnation, and the idea of such multiple life experiences would have been highly scandalous to him. The times and names and dates are not nearly as important as the experiences, and they are too numerous to list here. However, I will see to it at some time that they are made fully available. Some have been given in Rupert's class sessions, and some, though few, have appeared in the Seth material itself. In a book on reincarnation, I hope to have each of my previous personalities speak for themselves, for they should tell their own story. You should understand, therefore, that those personalities still exist and are independent. While what I am once seemed to be contained within those personalities, I was but the seed for them. In your terms, I can remember who I was. In greater terms, however, those personalities should speak for themselves. Perhaps you will see an analogy here when you compare the situation with age regression under hypnosis. Those personalities are not locked up inside of what I am, however. They have progressed according to their own fashion. They are not negated. In my terms, they coexist with me, but at another layer of reality. In several lives, I was consciously aware of my quote-unquote past existences. Once, as a monk, I found myself copying a manuscript that I myself had written in another life. Often, I was given to the love of weight and possessed it. Twice I died of starvation. I always found my deaths highly educational, in your terms, afterwards. It was always a lesson between lives to trace the thoughts and events that, quote-unquote, led to a given demise. None of my deaths surprised me. I felt during the process the inevitability, the recognition, even a sense of familiarity. Of course, this particular dying is mine and no other, and I accepted even the most bizarre circumstances then, feeling almost a sense of perfection. The life could not be finished properly without the death. There is a great sense of humility, and yet a great sense of exaltation as the inner self senses its freedom when death occurs. All my deaths were the complement of my lives, in that it seemed to me that it could not be otherwise. If I choose, in your terms, I can relive any portion of those existences, but those personalities go their own way. On a subjective level, I acted as a teacher and a speaker in each of my lives. In a few highly intuitive existences, I was aware of this fact. You do not understand as yet the high importance of the underside of consciousness. Besides your objective role in each life, your reincarnational challenges also involve your dream states, rhythms of creativity that flow and ebb beneath the daily world you know. So I became highly proficient in this way as a speaker and a teacher, in several lives that were externally uninteresting by contrast. My influence, work, and concern in such cases was far more vast than my quiet objective pursuits. I give you this information hoping to help you understand the true nature of your own reality. My reincarnational existences do not define what I am, however, nor do yours define you. Now, the soul knows itself, and is not confused by the terms or definitions. Through showing you the nature of my own reality, I hope to teach you the nature of your own. You are not bound to any category or corner of existence. Your reality cannot be measured any more than mine. I hope to illustrate the function of consciousness and personality through writing this book and enlarging your concepts. Now, I began by telling you that I was dictating this material through the auspices of a woman of whom I was quite fond. Let me now tell you that there are other realities involved. The following paragraphs will be written by another personality who stands relatively in the same position to me as I stand to the woman through whom I am now speaking. We are the voices who speak without tongues of our own. We are sources of that energy from which you come. We are creators, yet we have also been created. We seeded your universe as you seed other realities. We do not exist in your historical terms, nor have we known physical existence. Our joy created the exaltation from which your world comes. Our existence is such that communication must be made by others to you. Verbal symbols have no meaning for us. Our experience is not translatable. We hope our intent is. In the vast infinite scope of consciousness, all is possible. There is meaning in each thought. We perceive your thoughts as lights. They form patterns. Because of the difficulties of communication, it is nearly impossible for us to explain our reality. Know only that we exist. We send immeasurable vitality to you, and support all of those structures of consciousness with which you are familiar. You are never alone. We have always sent emissaries to you who understand your needs. Though you do not know us, we cherish you. Seth is a point in my reference, in our reference. He is an ancient portion of us. We are separate, but united. Always, the spirit forms the flesh. Now, there are kinds of consciousness that cannot be deciphered in physical terms. The quote-unquote personality who originated the paragraphs you have just read in such a tone. As mentioned, there is the same kind of connection between that personality and myself as the one that exists between Rupert and myself. But in your terms, Seth too is far further divorced from my reality than I am from Rupert's. You can imagine Seth too as a future portion of me if you prefer, and yet far more is involved. I am myself using terms here to try to make these ideas clearer. In a trance state, Rupert can contact me. In a state in some ways similar to a trance, I can contact Seth too. We are related in ways quite difficult to explain, united in webs of consciousness. My reality includes then not only reincarnational identities, but also other gestalts of being that do not necessarily have any physical connections. The same applies to each reader of this book. The soul is open-ended, therefore. It is not a closed spiritual or psychic system. I have tried to show you that the soul is not a separate, apart from you thing. It is no more divorced from you than God is. There is no need to create a separate God who exists outside of your universe and separate from it, nor is there any need to think of a soul as some distant entity. God, or all that is intimately a part of you. Quote-unquote, His energy forms your identity, and your soul is a part of you in the same manner. My own reincarnational personalities, probable selves, and even Seth too, exist within me now, as I exist within them. In your terms, Seth too is more advanced. In your terms, he is more alien, since he cannot relate to your physical existence as well as I do because of my background in it. Still, my experience enriches Seth too, and his experiences enrich me to the extent that I am able to perceive and translate them for my own use. In the same way, Rupert's personality is expanded through relationship with me, and I also gain through the experience, as even the best of teachers learn from each dimension of activity. In larger terms, my soul includes my reincarnational personalities, Seth too, and probable selves. I am as aware of my probable selves, incidentally, as I am of my reincarnational existences. Your concept of the soul is simply so limited. I am not really speaking in terms of group souls, though this interpretation can also be made. Each quote-unquote part of the soul contains the whole, a concept I am sure will startle you. As you become more aware of your own subjective reality, you will therefore become familiar with greater portions of your own soul. When you think of the soul as a closed system, you perceive it as such, and close off from yourself the knowledge of its greater creativity and characteristics. Seth too does represent what I will become to some extent and in your terms, yet when I become what he is, he will be something different. In the same terms now only, Rupert may become what I am, but then I will be something far different. Each of you are involved in the same kind of relationships, whether or not you are aware of them. Though it seems to you that reincarnational existences involve past and future events, they are existences parallel or adjacent to your own present life and consciousness. Other aspects of your greater identity exist, relatively speaking, about or around these. The answers to the nature of reality, the intimate knowledge of all that is that you all seek, is within your present experience. It will not be found outside of yourselves, but through an inner journey into yourself, through yourself, and through the world that you know.